Let's talk about ways to make master schedules using Microsoft Project. Things to think about. We can make these master files by integrating multiple files that are fully linked back and forth, read-write, so the changes in an underlying file are automatically reflected in the master file once they're opened. Option 2 is making the master file in the same way, where updates are allowed in the underlying files, but the master file is read-only. We recommend this option. The third is a static master, where it represents a point in time, say for example, as of a specific status date. This makes the file a point in time with no changes possible. It is purely static. And then we'll show you how to add some additional files. Why bother to do it? Well, we can go from different projects all the way to a portfolio presentation with special reports, views that we can customize, filtering based on whatever the needs of our client might be. Many files also means many schedulers. If there are underlying files, we can have several people working and reviewing in those files simultaneously, making updates while the master remains untouched. Then later we can see the effect of all those changes by opening the master file. So here's how we do it. Let's get started. We start by opening all the projects that we'd care to in Microsoft Project. I'm just going to select several projects here. Then we just right-click and open. Now that Microsoft Project has all the project files open, we go to the View tab, and then over here we select New Window. I can choose one or more projects by holding down the Control key, and then select OK. Our master has now been created, and each of these files has full read, write, and edit capability. What we do is File, Save As. I am deliberately saving to the same location where the underlying files are. I'm just going to call it Master. We recommend that all of the project files be co-located in the same folder. That's all there is to it. Okay, so actually it's not quite that straightforward. Let's take a look at a couple of things. In a master project file, remember it has its own unique project start date, its own project calendar, and its own unique task settings. Let's talk about that a little bit. We need to make sure project start dates align. So go into your subprojects and find the earliest start date for the earliest project. Use that as the project start date in the new master file. You can use the move project if needed if you've already inserted the project files, but you've probably already overcome and accepted some defaults there. So it's not really a big deal, but you need to make sure that the project start dates are lining up the way you need them to. Also, the status dates have to match. It doesn't do us any good to have a correct status date in the master project file if the subordinate files have status dates that are in history or not at all. Also, make sure you have a real project calendar assigned to all the files, including the master. It can be the same one, just make sure that it's not the standard calendar. A lot of people make alterations to the standard workday, and they do that in the standard calendar. And then when that moves forward, we're not getting appropriate information being shared, and we can't find out the source of errors why dates don't line up in the master. So make sure that each project file has its own calendar by name, and that the master has the same calendar. That can be a little bit tricky, but as long as each subproject file has its own named calendar, you will be okay. On task settings, this is not mandatory, but take a look at things like the default task settings for fixed work or fixed duration, whether or not it's effort driven, whether or not new tasks auto-link predecessors and successors to the prior tasks when they're inserted, number of work hours per day, things like that. Make sure all that type of stuff matches up. It's not strictly mandatory, but it sure makes life easier. Ready for option 2? This is actually pretty easy. The first thing you do is start with option 1. That's what we have right here. Now what we want to do is we want to make these projects read-only. We want to preserve the right to edit and make changes to the underlying files, But when we open the master, we want the changes to be reflected in this one, but we don't want anyone playing with this file and making edits that are going to flow downhill into the subordinate files. So I'm going to insert a field, and it's called Subproject Read Only. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight any field, and I'm going to go on the View tab and outline and show all tasks. Notice we now have every task in every file showing. I'm going to change the field Subproject Read Only. I'm going to change that to yes. I go to the very top file, Control Shift down. I now have everybody selected, and then I just use Fill Down. In my world, that's Control D. So now we see everything is Subproject File Read Only. Very easy. File save. Do we want to save changes to everything? We say yes to all. And now the file, the master file, is read only, and nobody can make changes here and cause that impact to go downhill. Option 3 starts the same as option 1. We create a master with linked files. Just come to the main file here. Notice how it's open. Double click on the summary task, the one over here with the icon. Come to the Advanced tab and deselect Link to Project. Notice here the read only, we could have also changed it just like we did in option 2. This is just a different way to do it. Just check this box to make it read only. What I've done here is I've unselected Link to Project File. We click OK. It gives me a warning. And you'll notice now that the icon disappears. It indicates that we are no longer linked to the file. This information becomes static. I'm going to do the same thing for one of the other files. Let's just do this one. I double click. I'm going to collapse that to show you something. I'm going to double click here. I'm going to select the Advanced tab, deselect Link to Project, OK. And now when I open it, it's still static, but the files are still present. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to add additional files. First, select a location immediately below where you want the project to appear. For example, right here, Task 2. Then what I'll do is go over to the Project tab and select Subproject. Notice that I've inserted a new file here, file D, and I have it in the same folder as I have the other project files that contribute to this same master. This is generally important. It saves a lot of trouble later. I now have a choice. I've selected Project D. I now can insert it down here, and it will be linked. I can insert it as read only by selecting the drop-down arrow, Insert or Insert Read Only. However, I'm going to deselect the link to project, and now notice that the Insert Read Only has gone away. I only have the option to insert. So I deselect Link to Project. This is going to make it static, correct? And then I just select Insert. There we go. I now have a static file that I've inserted, correct? I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to come back and do it again. Project, Subproject. I'm going to select File D, this time Link to Project, and it's not read only. Notice the difference in the icons here? This one is inserted as read write. These with this icon are read only. That's all there is to it. You can add and delete projects the same way. Just to show you that everybody's here, I'm going to go to the View tab, select all the tasks, outline, show all subtasks, and we see that we have a mixture of read only, and static files. That's all there is.